Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. I appreciate everybody very much for coming by. So, we do have the Sinquefield Cup going on, and I think we have a pretty highly anticipated game. I think that pretty much for this tournament, anytime Hans Niemann plays anybody, it's highly anticipated. But I do have the round 6 game for you between Hans Niemann and Wesley. So, and I appreciate everybody very much for watching my stuff. Things have been going pretty good the past couple of days. So I very much appreciate it. And as I always say, keep an open mind. Innocent until proven guilty. So we should treat everybody this way. Anyways, yes, for all my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay. Kamusta? Aking makaibigan. Hello ulit. Masaya kong makita kang muli. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my stuff. As always, I'm going to be greeting y'all and anybody else who has watched and commented and subscribed. Very much appreciated. I am almost at 4,000, which is huge to me. It might not be huge to other people, but I appreciate it very much. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got the move e4, e5, knight to f3. And this game is a particular treat because I really honestly don't feel like I've done this variation before on my channel. I always talk about it when I show Petrov's, but I never really get a chance to get into it. So we do see the move knight to f6. Of course, the Petrov's defense, also known as the Russian defense, or the Russian game. Knight takes e5. We do have the move d6. Knight comes back to f3. We got knight takes e4, d4, d5, bishop to d3. And this is the super main line. If you want to play absolutely the strongest possible as white, you will play this way. It's not like, you're just guaranteed to win no matter what you play, but this is for sure going to give you the best chance. You're definitely going to have the biggest advantage playing these lines. And so, I mean, of course, people go off on sidelines and try to throw you off. So you can win in anything, but this is considered super mainline stuff. We do see the move bishop to f5. We got castles by white. Bishop comes to e7. As you guys always know, with the Berlin, or with this type of a situation as far as like the Russia game is concerned, this e-file is completely open. So if a rook can swing over here, I mean, you might have a little something going on. Especially if you can, especially if you can maybe do something like that, push f3, get this knight under fire. So we do play bishop to e7 because then that pretty much nullifies all the tactics in the situation. The rook does come to e1. We got castles by black, knight b to d2. And then we do have the retreat knight back to d6. And we are prepared to retake this bishop capture with the knight. Now, backing up, you could have played, it's definitely by far not as good. Knight to d6 is pretty much going to be the best possible move you can play. So if you're thinking, I'll just take on d2 with the knight, the bishop will take on f5, the knight would take f3 with check, and then the queen taking f3. And the thing about this particular situation is white does have double bishops, and they are pretty nicely pointing over here to this king side. You are going to play c3 just to solidify your pawn chain, and I mean, you can maybe have like a queen move and a rook lift, and that might be kind of nasty for you as black, so you probably don't want to go into that. So like I said, knight came to d6, knight comes down to f1 because we are now prepared to take back that bishop capture with the queen. We do see the move c6. We got bishop to f4, bishop takes d3, and then queen takes d3. And even though black is not winning, like, it's not like white has a perfectly great position, but if you just look at it visually, both sides just need to kind of make one move. But white is slightly ahead of black just simply because they just need to fix this knight somehow. If they can do that, then they pretty much have their position all completely taken care of. And we will see that coming up. The knight goes to a6, which might look kind of weird, but this is a very top move. You are just wanting to redirect it back to c7. The knight does come up to e3. In this particular position, like I said, white is slightly further ahead because this queen is still on its starting square and this queen has moved. So nothing to write home about, but I mean, it's sometimes these little things that make a difference in the game. Knight does come back to c7, and then we do see the novelty of the game, which is the move b3. So one thing you want to try to think about, b3 is a legitimate move. It's not the best move in the position, but I mean, it has a nice idea behind it. When you get to the middle game, you get in the position where you basically have all of your pieces pretty much where they need to go, which is what white does. you have to start thinking about trying to move yourself forward and think about what can I try to do to prevent my opponent from doing anything. So the biggest thing that you're going to be thinking about, this bishop isn't really doing a whole lot on e7, so at some point it's going to have to redirect, but you are thinking of these knights right here. Like, what do these knights have the ability to start trying to do? Well, number one, this one has the ability to kind of go over here, and then this one probably has the ability to go here. So one of the things that Hans Niemann is thinking about is trying to restrict the knights as much as possible, and that is why the move b3 comes. It has a lot of logic behind it, but like I said, when I was looking at it, it's not one of the top computer moves, but it makes a lot of sense, and it is the novelty of the game. So we do see the move knight over to e6. Like I said, the bishop goes up to e5. We got knight down to e4, so that is another square that the knight can go to. We do see the move c4 because we are just trying to greatly move this pawn because then we have a free knight. And I mean, I like free knights. I don't know about you guys. But we do see the move knight to f6. We got rook a to d1. You know, if black decides that he wants to take here with the pawn and then pawn takes back, you do have the ability of pushing this pawn here in the center of the board, and you can very easily create a passer. So what better way to try to reinforce that by going rook a to d1? It's what, you know, rooks on open, half open, or possibly soon to be open files are definitely what you want to be doing. We do see the move g6. We got g3. So both sides kind of have the same similar idea. You know, this knight did have the ability to go to f5. This knight had the ability to come down here. Of course not now because the bishop is covering. But sometimes in these types of structures, you do have knight h5s redirecting them to f4. So if you can kind of double gang up on this square, then you have a little something going on. So you're creating a lift for yourself on both sides, and you're just trying to make sure that you're restricting each other's knights as much as possible. We do see the move a6. We got rook up to e2. We got rook over to e8. We see the move h4, which is very common in these types of positions. We do see the move knight to h5, like I said. You know, and you kind of have to be a little careful. Even though it's not really a situation right now, you do kind of need to be careful because, I mean, you could be seeing some possible sacrifices over here in this position. Especially if you can knock this bishop somewhere off of this diagonal, you might have a little bit of tenderness going on in this g3 square. You never know. Pawn takes d5, and then the knight does come down to g2. So Hans Niemann is thinking about the possibility of these different things occurring. So even though it's not necessarily what you need to do in this particular position, you know, it's an idea. You know, it's just something that a human would think about. Thinking about, hey, man, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on this, you know, pawn chain that I have. Let me just go ahead and reinforce it with this knight. So we do see the move f6. And we have reached a position in the game now that we have a really, I think it's a really hard move to find. It's a really interesting move. There's pretty much two moves you can make in this position with the bishop, right? So I think it kind of narrows it down and makes it easier. But if you want to go ahead and guess the move that Hans Niemann decides to play in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, like I said, this definitely wasn't like, you know, like a super mysterious type of thing. So as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, you know, it might be a little difficult. I'm not sure. You guys have to let me know. I think a majority of people would be thinking, I got to go back to f4 because there's no other safe squares. Like, I can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, right? I got to go back to f4 with my piece. Well, the thing about it is this. You actually had more than just bishop to f4 if you notice something in black's position. If you notice that black has a knight literally hanging right here, if you move bishop to b8, which, like I said, I think some of you guys might be thinking, what? Why would I put, what? Like, I just set it right next to the rook for what? But like I said, this knight is undefended, so you actually have a free kind of move in that situation. So black can either take your rook or take your bishop or defend their knight. Which is what we actually see in the game, king to f7. But like I said, if you did guess the move bishop to f4, the problem is the resulting positions that come from either move, they're a little bit different. One is definitely better than the other. If you did decide to go back to f4, you would be seeing knight e takes f4, knight takes f4, knight takes f4, pawn takes f4. And the problem is, from a human perspective, you don't really kind of want this position to come up on the board. Like, you have this pawn over here lonely, and then you have these double pawns here. So, I mean, then you have this, you know, isolated pawn, and it's like your position, like, it definitely could look better. So if we take a look at what, you know, Hans Niemann decides to do, which I think was a lot more logical, bishop to b8, then the king came down, and we have the move g4. We got to create some type of space. The queen takes on b8, and then the pawn takes h5, knight down to f4, knight takes, queen takes, and then we do have pawn taking g6, pawn taking g6. And this is just really kind of much prettier. Yes, you pretty much have very similar issues in the position. You have all these isolated pawns, which, I mean, black definitely has a better position. But like I said, you know, you don't have the doubling of those pawns there. And I mean, so both sides, both positions were actually completely equal as far as the computer's concerned. But like I said, I think that a human would rather kind of go into this position than the other position, because, you know, when you have double pawns and isolated pawns, they take quite a bit of babysitting so that they could be okay. They're really needy. So we do see the move rook d to e1. Of course, you want to take over that file. We do see bishop to d6, and it kind of forces the trade a little bit. Rook takes e8, rook takes e8, rook takes e8, and then we do see queen to g4 with check. And as you guys know, if you didn't have the queen protecting this knight would be bye-bye with this check. So it would be bad. King goes to f1. The king takes on e8. We do see the move a4. And one of the things I want you to notice is black has a dark square. Black has a bishop, right? So the thing about the particular situation that we have is we have a position that is somewhat open, and we have a bishop as black compared to the knight that we have as white. And so the position because of that is a little bit better. Also, something that you need to notice is whenever your opponent has a bishop of a certain color, you want to try to put your pawns on the opposite color of that bishop so that way they don't become targets. The problem that white has in their position right now is that they literally have all three of these pawns on dark squares. So the problem is they are just sitting targets for the queen and for the bishop. So that's not really kind of what you want. But as you can see, you don't really have the ability to really push any of these pawns. So you kind of have sitting weaknesses in your position. And that is pretty much what makes, you know, the advantage that black has in this particular situation. And it's about trying to get your pieces coordinated. If you can try to do that, then you can improve your position for sure. We do have the move king to f7. We got queen over to e3. We do see the bishop going to f4. And this is kind of annoying. It's like, where do I move my queen at, man? You know? So the queen goes back to d3. You got queen to h3 with check. King goes to e2. You do see queen going to e6 with check. The king going down to f1. So as you can see, I mean, black has a lot more movability with their position. And black is really kind of stuck, like going back and forth, and they don't really have a good way to kind of go forward. So that is the main problem that white is having in this position. It's definitely holdable, but it's really hard to try to make progress for white because you're so defensive. The queen does come down to e4, and this trade is illegal. Like, do not trade pieces here at all. If we trade pieces here, you're literally going to be in the most defensive, like, you know, inactive position possible. If the queen takes here on e4, you got pawn taking e4, and then where do you put your knight? You got to do something dumb like knight to g1. And it's like, dude, I mean, where are you going to move? If you can successfully get king here and then knight here, then you're good to go. But, I mean, this king is just too active. It can come easily down here to d5, and that's one of the reoccurring things in the entire thing. So, after the queen came to e4, Hans Niemann very smartly avoids this trade, goes to queen c3. Bishop goes back to d6. So, as you can see, compared to the bishop, the knight is not really doing a very good job at all. Like, it's really hard to make any progress in this position. And then the knight is also tied down to the protection of this pawn, so makes things worse. The king does go to g2. You got queen back to g4. So literally when Hans is like, dude, I think I'm gonna try to get myself free a little bit, Wesley Sells like, no, you're not. You're not doing all of that, bro. The king goes back down to f1. So you see, all basically white has done is kind of shift back and forth, like for like about 7 or 8 moves. They're not making any progress going forward at all. The king goes over to e7. The knight goes down to g1. The queen goes to f5. And, I mean, it's not clear for either side how either side is going to make progress. But you can see that white has a much more defensive position. The queen goes to e3 with check. The queen goes down to e4. And like I said before, I mean, you know, you definitely don't want to trade. But actually trading in this position would be bad, but it's not as bad as the move that's actually played. The move is king to e2, and this completely just puts the game completely in Wesley Sells' hands. I mean, you don't want to trade at all in any case. So moving your king onto the same line as your queen basically just puts you in a situation where you're going to have to trade coming up. The much better idea was actually to go knight to e2 and then either, you know, most likely go to c3 or just kind of see what the bishop does. Maybe you can go to g3, stuff like that. And this queen is pinned to the king at the moment, so that was a much better plan to go forward. But we do see king to e2, and then the bishop comes down to h2, and it's like, bro, why are you picking on my knight, dude? Like, what's wrong with my knight just trying to mind its own business? Like, I mean, this knight, where do you put this knight at, man? like I said, the knight is just so horribly placed. It is not living its best life. You got knight up to f3, and then you have that bishop to f4 move that I mentioned earlier that was like, man, this is just It's not where you want to be at, man. And then, like I said, you are kind of in a situation where you have to trade queens. You can't move the queen anywhere. The queen does take e4 with check. Pawn takes e4. And then you have to retreat back down to a very, very passive square with your knight, down to e1. The main issue that you need to be noticing for black is these pawns. These pawns have the ability to have a majority no matter how you cut it. And they are going to, especially with this king being able to come down or even come down here, they are going to be able to force their way through. So that is, it's probably not easy to see right now, but this king has very, very good mobility. And I mean, look at black. You can't go here, or look at white. You can't go here. You can't go here. You can't go here. Like where do you go with your knight? I mean, you can try to go over here, but the bishop is just going to go back, like probably to d6. And this king is still going to be able to penetrate. So this is just like, I mean, for somebody like Wesley So, this is just lights out, man. Like pretty much from this point on. You got the king going to e6. Like I said, the knight goes to g2. So this does retreat the bishop, but I mean, the bishop has long range. You do have knight up to e3, and then you have this really nice bishop to a7, and it's like, all right, man, what am I supposed to do with this pawn? Because if I push the pawn, which is what we see in the game, I can't sustain it because bishop is going to take e3. And then, I mean, you got a 3-on-2 pawn majority with an active king. You don't want that. So the knight does come down to g2, like some trickeries. It's like, hey, bro, I'm going to try to see if you snap on this, because then I'm going to take this and I got to pass pawn, bro. Wesley So says, bro, you know, I'm a super GM. I mean, you're a super GM, but I'm a 2800 plus guy for a reason. I don't do stuff like that. King goes to e5. So like I said, literally where you dream of being with the king is right there in the dead center of the board. You got the move d6. You just, I mean, the pawn was going to be gone one way or another. So you might as well try to deflect the king over. The knight does go to g4, or go to f4. We do see g5, pawn takes g5, pawn takes g5. And then the knight does come down to h3. We got g4. And so this is what makes knights really, really hard to have when you're trying to go against pawns, because you see this pawn is literally just continuously pushing down the board. The knight goes to g5. We're hoping that black doesn't just take care of that pawn, but he does. King goes to e5. We see knight up to f7 with check. We see the king down to f4. We see the king down to f1. Bishop goes to b6. And this is, you know, pretty nicely defending against them being able to kind of come over and do that. So we do see the knight going to d6. We got king down to f3. And the problem that you have in this position is you can push either pawn and basically deflect this pawn away. And then you just have a completely passed pawn. So that is literally the endgame that we're in. And this is something, I mean, Wesley So could do this in his sleep. You got the knight down to c4. You got bishop taking f2. And this is just super crazy, because he just gave up his bishop when you didn't. I mean, you could have did a whole bunch of other moves. This is like a really cute way to end the game. Give up the bishop, because then what is white going to be able to do? Knight goes to d2. And then we see the move king up to f4. And then we do see the king, well, no. King to f4 is a position that Hans Niemann does resign the game. So we did resign here at this point. So just as a sample, you know, what if Wesley So just did that and got into this position and gave up his bishop, right? Well, the thing about it is, I think you guys can probably see it. If the king does take f2, you have e3 with check. No. And then the thing about it is, this is the thing about it. This is what the computer suggests that you do. Go king to e1. And then the computer doesn't even say take the knight on. Okay, that's one of the moves. But it gives you another option. You can literally just push g3. And you have two possibilities, right? The king can slide over here. And you can create a situation where the pawn takes, and you have split pawns 2 files apart, which is a monster endgame type of concept. Or you have the ability where you can go back here and just create a dumb knight. And then the pawn is going to push through regardless of what you do. So that is, it's not good things to choose from. Like, I wouldn't want to choose from these things at all. So that is that game. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really like kind of, you know, nicely played game by Wesley So. And so that is that game, like I said. So salamat, Hakim Makai Bigan, and I will see you guys next time.